Your company, Mahindra & Mahindra, generates the vast majority of its approximately $17 billion in revenue in India, some 70% on a consolidated basis. So I want to ask you about the Indian economy. Public and private forecasts peg Indian economic growth over the next 2 to 3 years at 7.5%, perhaps slightly higher. Is that realistic, given the global headwinds?
I think it's realistic, and I must say that, India has always been pregnant with potential.
Yes.
That's one of the most common phrases we hear. It's been the longest pregnancy ever anyone can imagine. I think this time it's possibly for real. Now, the current government, to continue the metaphor, is going through hard labor, and people are wondering whether this is going to result in any output at all, if you will. But I think things are very, very propitious right now. There is one wild card people are watching, and that's the monsoon, which is ironic that after so many years of modernization, we are still looking up at the sky to predict what the GNP will be. But if we are blessed with a good monsoon after 2 bad years...
The rainy season, in other words.
The rainy season, yes. I think then agriculture will take off, the consumption will take off, and India will surprise on the upside.
I want you to fill in the blank for me. Growth could be faster if Prime Minister Modi did what?
There is no silver bullet. I wish there was one blank. There are a number of things a leader like him has to do, especially to get out of the kind of slump India's been in. He's getting a lot of flack for not having done something really big. I remember when I was interviewed right after his coming in, and people were asking me, isn't there too much hype? Isn't there too much expectation? And I said, finally there's some hype and there's some expectation. So he brought a lot of energy and expectation. There's a downside to that. But I think what's not been communicated well by his government, to be honest, strange because he's a good communicator, is how many things are going right, how many of the Lego pieces are being put together. So I'm happy to go into some of them, but the fact is a number of the small pieces are building a foundation. And as I said, I think when added together, India is going to surprise.
What else stands in the way of economic expansion right now?
Right now, it is getting the benefit of transparent business and transparent enterprise and governance down to the lowest level. What I give him 100% marks for is bringing in transparency in big business. So for companies like me, this is an unbelievable time to do business, because companies like us, we do business the right way, are finally seeing enormous transparency, no transaction costs. I haven't even been to New Delhi to meet Mr. Modi since he got elected. There is no need. I have no request. When people tell me, you haven't met the Prime Minister, I said, for what? Because they now call us from the government ministries and say, what are the impediments? Do you need anything? Is everything going well? Incredible.
That's a sea change.
Sea change. And I think that's not being credited, that's not being recognized enough globally. The problem is, if somebody asks me, has everything become transparent right down to the bottom? No. That's what he's working on. And he's got a wonderful little acronym he's got for what he's doing. It's called JAM, which 2 of them are Indian words. The last is mobile. But he is trying to get subsidies and benefits using digital technology directly via the mobile to most people. If that works, you will see a transformed India.
What about central bank policy? Are you among those business people who say Raghuram Rajan should be cutting rates faster?
We'll always say that. But at the same time, I'll say the man has been one of the biggest treasures of the Indian economy. When I come to the US and I talk to people on Wall Street, and you're in a general discussion and you ask them who's the best finance person in the world, they always bring up Raghuram Rajan's name. He is very respected. He has been his own man. He has reined in animal spirits at the right time. And I think he's beginning to ease up on rates just at the right time.
Now tell me, what's your read on the Chinese economy?
It's interesting. For many years, all of us, the entire world economic and business community, have been telling China, you have to change your model. You have to cool off your growth rate. You have to move from investment-led growth to consumption-led growth. They're finally doing that. And they're still getting 6%, I think was a figure that came in for industrial production yesterday.
If you believe the figures.
I have no knowledge to disbelieve them, but even if you give a fudge factor of some reasonable amount, if you're still getting 7% growth after all this time, and even if that becomes 6.5%, as they make this transition, isn't that what we asked them to do? Why are we making such a noise about it?
So you're fine with what's going on in China?
So far, as I said, I think the economics are not what worry me. What might have a question mark is the political issues. How is the new regime being perceived? What is the climate for doing business in China? That, to me, is a far bigger question mark.
Mahindra & Mahindra was a growth machine until 2014, and then all of a sudden the revenue growth stopped. What happened?
I think it had to do with the economy. You pointed out, Eric, yourself, that we are still very dependent on the Indian economy. The Indian economy went into a little bit of hibernation, if you will. And unfortunately, due to the monsoon, which was bad for 2 years, that killed consumption. There's another very interesting reason why the Indian economy lost a little bit of steam. And there's a virtuous story behind it. Some international magazine once said that crony capitalism is a kind of quantitative easing, which I thought was very interesting. Now, if you suck crony capitalism out of an economy, you're also sucking out a lot of oxygen. And until the government can step in and replace that private capital increase with its own infrastructure spending, and that kicks up, you're going to get a lull in the economy. So given our dependence on the Indian economy, it's unsurprising that we also went into a bit of a lull.
So how do you become less dependent on the Indian economy? You want to become one of the world's most admired brands, 50 most admired brands by 2021. Mm-hmm. How do you do that without doing a whole lot more business outside India?
You're right. I mean, that, in a sense, that's a perfect leading question for me right now. The goal is, of course, to diversify. When we become as large as we are not enormous, but we are large enough now to be looking for alternate sources of revenue generation around the world, and that's precisely our goal. And interestingly, if you look at the fastest growing company we have in terms of product and brand, it's right here in the US. It's our tractor business. It's our ag tractor business, the Mahindra brand. Now, I don't think, Eric, you don't look like somebody who's probably
haven't lately driven a Mahindra tractor.
Driven a tractor. But if you happen to be somewhere in an area in the country which did use tractors, I'd say arguably you would know what the Mahindra brand is.
But can you grow that international business organically? Or in order to achieve your objectives, do you have to buy something?
Of course, you do, certainly, and it's a mix of the two. You cannot ignore organic growth. We did acquire a tractor company, two in fact, in China. We have acquired a very significant stake in Mitsubishi Tractors, which interestingly sells through the Mahindra brand in the US. So we are doing both organic and inorganic.
I had a look through your last annual report. The next one is coming soon. So this is for fiscal 2015. Mm-hmm. You take corporate and social responsibility pretty seriously, don't you?
Absolutely.
I need to ask you about one of your commitments, promoting gender equality. Mm-hmm. Because in the same annual report, I think I came upon a figure that suggested Mahindra & Mahindra at the parent company level employs about 20,000 people full-time. Is that right?
No.
Only 576 were women, is that right?
It's a very low percentage, and is not something that we are proud of.
What do you do about that?
Again, there's no silver bullet to this, Eric. If you go out and say, I'm going to mandate a kind of affirmative action, you raise all sorts of other issues about meritocracy, about the feelings of...
Of course, but this is what makes it so complicated.
Which it is. What you do, therefore, we found that the place where we've succeeded the most in the group is in our real estate division. The CEO of the real estate company is a woman. And miraculously then, we find that a lot of the top management are suddenly women. There is some kind of phenomenon there. So normally when you don't have a woman CEO, you will get an answer from your HR people. We're looking. We can't find anyone who's adequately competent.
So if that's the case, can we count on Mahindra & Mahindra to put more women in senior managerial roles?
You will see us seeding leadership of women in many areas in our companies, because we believe then by osmosis you get growth. You don't get it by affirmative action or mandating.